Hello, my friends, and welcome back. It's wonderful to see you. Today's stories are once again from the archives of the Brothers Grimm. The brothers have two stories about a small but brave man named Tom Thumb, who I'm sure you've heard of at some point. Today, we're going to explore both of these stories in their full original detail and see how it matches up to what you know of brave little Tom. So settle in and relax. Stay a while and listen. Tom Thumb. There was once a poor peasant who sat in the evening by the hearth and poked the fire, and his wife sat and span. Then he said, "How sad is it that we have no children? With us all is so quiet, and those other houses it's all noisy and lively." "Yes," replied the wife, and sighed. "Even if we had only one, and it were quite small, and only as big as a thumb, I should be quite satisfied, and we would still love it with all our hearts." So now it happened that the woman fell ill, and after 7 months gave birth to a child that was perfect in all its limbs, but no longer than a thumb. Then they said, "It is as we wished it to be, and it shall be our dear child." And because of its size, they called it Tom Thumb. They did not let it want for food, but the child did not grow taller, but remained as it had been at the first. Nevertheless, it looked sensibly out of its eyes, soon showed itself to be a wise and nimble creature, for everything it did turned out well. One day, the peasant was getting ready to go into the forest to cut wood, when he said, as if to himself, "Oh, how I wish there was anyone who could bring the cart to me." "Oh, father," cried Tom Thumb, "I will soon bring the cart, rely on that, and it shall be in the forest at the appointed time." The man smiled and said, "How can that be done? Thou art far too small to lead the horse by its reins." "That is of no consequence, father. If my mother will only harness it, I shall sit in the horse's ear and call out to him how he is to go." "Well," answered the man, "for once we will try it." When the time came, the mother harnessed the horse and placed Tom Thumb in its ear, and then the little creature cried, "Gee up, gee up!" And then it went quite properly, as if with its master, and the cart went the right way into the forest. It so happened, just as he was turning a corner, and the little one was crying, "Gee up!" 2 strange men came towards him. "My word," said one of them, "what is this? There's a cart coming, and a driver is calling to the horse, but he's still not to be seen." "That can't be right," said the other. "We'll follow the cart and see where it stops." The cart, however, drove right into the forest, and exactly to the place where the wood had been cut. When Tom Thumb saw his father, he cried to him, "Seest thou, father? Here I am with the cart. Now take me down." The father got hold of the horse with his left hand, and with the right took his little son out of the air. Tom Thumb sat down quite merrily on a straw, but when the 2 strange men saw him, they did not know what to say for astonishment. Then one of them looked to the other and said, "Hark! The little fellow would make our fortune if we exhibited him in a large town for money. We will buy him." And they went to the peasant and said, "Sell us the little man. He shall be treated well with us." "No," replied the father. "He is the apple of my eye, and all the money in the world cannot buy him from me." Tom Thumb, however, when he heard of the bargain, had crept up to the folds of the father's coat, placed himself on his shoulder, and whispered in his ear, "Father, do give me away. I will soon come back again." And the father parted with him to the 2 men for a handsome bit of money. "Where wilt thou sit?" they said to him. "Oh, just sit me on the rim of your hat, and then I can walk backwards and forwards and look at the country and still not fall down." And they did as he wished. And when Tom Thumb had taken leave of his father, they went away with him. They walked until it was dusk, and then the little fellow said, "Do take me down. I want to come down." The man took off his hat and put the little fellow on the ground by the wayside, and he leapt and crept about a little between the sods, and then he suddenly slipped into a mouse hole which he had sought out. "Good evening, gentlemen. Just go home without me," he cried to them and mocked them. They ran thither and stuck their sticks into the mouse hole, but it was all lost labor. Tom Thumb crept still further in, and soon it became quite dark, and they were forced to go home with their vexation and their empty purses. When Tom Thumb saw they were gone, he crept back out of the subterranean passage. "It is so dangerous to walk on the ground in the dark," he said. "How easily a neck or a leg is broken." Fortunately, he knocked against an empty snail shell. "Thank God," he said, "and that I can pass the night in safety," and got into it. Not long afterwards, when he was just going to sleep, he heard 2 men go by. One of them was saying, how shall we continue to get hold of the rich pastor's silver and gold? I could tell thee that, cried Tom Thumb, interrupting him. What was that? Said one of the thieves in fright. I heard someone speaking. They stood still listening. Tom Thumb spoke again, and said, Take me with you, and I'll help you. But where art thou? Just look on the ground and observe from whence my voice comes, he replied. There the thieves at length found him and lifted him up. Oh, little imp, thou wilt help us, they said. A great deal, said he. I will creep into the pastor's room through the iron bars, and will reach out to you whatever you want to have. Come then, they said, and we will see what thou canst do. When they got to the pastor's house, Tom Thumb crept into the room, but instantly cried out with all his might, Do you want to have everything that is here? The thieves were alarmed as if, but to speak softly as not to waken anyone. Tom Thumb, however, behaved as if he had not understood this and cried again, What do you want? Do you want to have everything that is here? The cook, who slept in the next room, heard this and sat up in bed and listened. The thieves, however, had in their fright run some distance away, but at last they took courage and thought, Little rascal wants to mock us. They came back and whispered to him, Come, be serious, reach us out something. And Tom Thumb cried again as loudly as he could, I really will give you everything, just put your hands in. The maid, who was listening, heard this quite distinctly, and jumped out of bed and rushed to the door. The thieves took flight and ran as if the wild huntsmen were behind them. But as the maid could not see anything, she went to strike a light. When she came to the place with it, Tom Thumb, unperceived, betook himself to the granary, and the maid, after she had examined every corner and found nothing, lay down in her bed again, and believed that, after all, she had only been dreaming with open eyes and ears. Tom Thumb had climbed up along the hay and found a beautiful place to sleep in. There he intended to rest until day and then go home again to his parents. But he had other things to go through. Truly there is much affliction and misery in this world. When day dawned, the maid arose from her bed to feed the cows. Her first walk was into the barn, where she laid hold of an armful of hay, and precisely that very one which poor Tom Thumb was lying asleep. He, however, was sleeping so soundly that he was aware of nothing, and did not wake until he was in the mouth of the cow, who had picked him up with the hay. Oh, heavens! Cried he. How have I got into the fulling mill? But he soon discovered where he was. Then it was necessary to be careful not to let himself go in between the teeth and be dismembered, but he was nevertheless forced to slip down into the stomach with the hay. In this little room the windows are forgotten, he said, and no sun shines in, and neither will a candle be brought. His quarters were especially unpleasing to him. The worst was, more and more hay was always coming in by the door, and the space grew less and less. Then at length in his anguish he cried out as loud as he could, Bring me no more fodder! Bring me no more fodder! The maid was milking the cow when she heard someone speaking, and saw no one, and perceived that it was the same voice that she had heard in the night. And she was so terrified that she slipped off her stool and spilt the milk. She ran in great haste to her master and said, Oh, heavens, pastor, the cow has been speaking. Thou art mad, replied the pastor, but he went himself to the byre to see what was there. Hardly, however, had he set foot inside when Tom Thumb again cried, Bring me no more fodder! Bring me no more fodder! The pastor himself was alarmed and thought that an evil spirit had gone into the cow and ordered her to be killed. She was killed, but the stomach in which Tom Thumb was thrown on the midden. Tom Thumb had great difficulty in working his way. However, he succeeded so far as to get some room, but just as he was going to thrust his head out, a new misfortune occurred. A hungry wolf ran thither and swallowed the whole stomach in one gulp. Tom Thumb did not lose courage. Perhaps, he thought, the wolf will listen to what I've got to say. And he called him out from his stomach. Dear wolf, I know of a magnificent feast for thee. Where is it to be had? Said the wolf. In such and such a house thou must creep into it through the kitchen sink, and wilt find cakes and bacon and sausages, and as much of them as thou canst eat. He described to him exactly his father's house. The wolf did not require to be told twice, squeezed himself in the night through the sink, and ate to his heart's content in the larder. When he had eaten his fill, he wanted to go out again, but he had become so big that he could not go out the same way. Tom Thumb had reckoned on this, and now began to make a violent noise in the wolf's body. raged and screamed as loudly as he could. "Wilt thou be quiet?" said the wolf. "Thou wilt wake up the people." "Eh? What?" replied the little fellow. "Thou hast eaten thy fill, and I will make merry likewise," and began once more to scream with all his strength. At last his father and mother were aroused by it, ran to the room and looked in through the opening in the door. When they saw the wolf inside, they ran away. The husband fetched his axe, and the wife the scythe. "Stay behind," said the man when they entered the room. "When I have given him a blow, if he is not killed by it, thou must cut him down and hew his body to pieces." And then Tom Thumb heard his parents' voices and cried, "Dear father, I am here. I'm in the wolf's body," said the father full of joy. "Thank God, our dear child has found us again," and bade the woman take away her scythe, that Tom Thumb might not be hurt with it. After that he raised his arm and struck the wolf with such a blow on his head that he fell down dead. And they got knives and scissors and cut his body open and drew the little fellow forth. "Ah," said the father, "what sorrow we have gone through for thy sake." "Yes, father, I have gone about the world a great deal. Thank heaven I breathe fresh air again." Where hast thou been then?" "Ah, father, I have been in a mouse's hole, in a cow's stomach, and then in a wolf's. Now I will stay with you, and we will not sell thee again, no, not for all the riches in the world," said his parents, and they embraced and kissed their dear Tom Thumb, and they gave him to eat and to drink, and had some new clothes made for him, for his own had been spoiled on his journey. Tom Thumb, Journeyman. A certain tailor had a son, who happened to be small and no bigger than a thumb, and on this account he was always called Tom Thumb. He had, however, some courage in him, and said to his father, "Father, I must and will go out into the world." "That's right, my son," said the old man, and took a long darning needle, and made a knob of sealing wax on it at the candle. "And there is a sword for thee to take with thee on the way." And the little tailor wanted to have one more meal with them, and hopped into the kitchen to see what his lady mother had cooked for the last time. It was, however, just dished up, and the dish stood on the hearth. He said, "Mother, what is there to eat today?" "See for thyself," said his mother. So Tom Thumb jumped on the hearth and peeped into the dish, but as he stretched his neck in too far, the steam from the food caught hold of him and carried him up the chimney. He rode about in the air on the steam for a while, until at length he sank down to the ground again. But now the little tailor was outside in the wide world, and he travelled about, and went to a master in his craft. But the food was not good enough for him. "Mistress, if you give us no better food," said Tom Thumb, "I will go away, and early tomorrow morning I will write with chalk on the door of your house, 'Too many potatoes, too little meat. Farewell, Mr. Potato King.'" "What wouldst thou have forsooth, grasshopper?" said the mistress, and grew angry, and seized the dishcloth, and was just going to strike him. But my little tailor crept nimbly under a thimble, peeped out from beneath it, and put his tongue out at the mistress. She took up the thimble, and wanted to get hold of him, but little Tom Thumb hopped onto the cloth, and while the mistress was opening it out and looking for him, he got into a crevice in the table. "Oh, lady mistress," cried he, and thrust his head out. And when she began to strike him, he leapt down into the drawer. At last, however, she caught him and drove him out of the house. The little tailor journeyed on and came to a great forest, and there he fell with a band of robbers who had designed to steal the king's treasure. When they saw the little tailor, they, "A little fellow like that can creep through a keyhole and serve as lockpick to us." "Hello," cried one of them, "thou giant Goliath, wilt thou go to the treasure chamber with us? Thou canst slip thyself in and throw out the money." Tom Thumb reflected a while and at length and said, "Yes," and went with them to the treasure chamber. He then looked at the doors above and below to see if there was any crack in them, and it was not long before he spied one, which was broad enough to let him in. He was therefore about to get in at once, but one of the two sentries who stood before the door observed him and said to the other, "What a ugly spider is creeping in here! I will kill it." "Let the poor creature alone," said the other. "It has done thee no harm." Then Tom Thumb got safely through the crevice into the treasure chamber, opened the window beneath which the robbers were standing, and threw out to them one fowler after another. When the little tailor was in the full swing of his work, he heard the king coming to inspect his treasure chamber, and crept hastily into a hiding place. The king noticed that several solid thalers were missing. He could not conceive who could have stolen them, for locks and bolts were in good condition and all seemed well guarded. Then he went away again and said to the sentries, "Be on watch. Someone is after the money." When therefore Tom Thumb recommenced his labors, they heard the money moving, a sound of clink, clink, clink. They ran swiftly in to seize the thief, but the little tailor who had heard them coming was still swifter, and leapt into a corner and covered himself with a thaler, so that nothing could be seen of him, and at the same time he mocked the sentries and cried, "Here I am!" The sentries ran thither, but as they got there, he had already hopped to another corner under a thaler, and was crying, "Ho, ho, here I am!" The watchman sprang there in haste, but Tom Thumb had long ago gotten to a third corner, and he was crying, "Ho, ho, ho, here I am!" and thus made fools of them. He drove them so long round about the treasure chamber that they were weary and went away. Then by degrees he threw all the thalers out, dispatching the last with all his might, and hopped nimbly down upon it, and flew down. Then hopped nimbly upon it and flew down with it through the window. The robbers paid him great compliments. "Thou art a valiant hero," they said. "Wilt thou be our captain?" Tom Thumb, however, declined, and said he wanted to see the world first. They now divided the booty, but the little tailor only asked for a kreuzer because he could not carry more. He then once more buckled on his sword, bade the robbers good-bye, and took to the road. First he went to work with some masters, but had no liking for that, and at last he hired himself as a manservant in an inn. The maids, however, could not endure him, for he saw all they did secretly without their seeing him, and he told their master and mistress what they had taken off the plates and carried away out of the cellar for themselves. And they said, "Wait, we will pay thee off," and arranged with each other to play him a trick. Soon afterwards, when one of the maids was mowing in the garden and saw Tom Thumb jumping about, creeping up and down the plants, she mowed him up quickly with the grass, tied in all the great cloth, and secretly threw it to the cows. Now amongst them there was a great black one, who swallowed him down without hurting him. Down below, however, it pleased him ill, for it was quite dark, neither was any candle burning. When the cow was being milked, he cried, "Strip, strap, straw. Will the pail soon be full?" But the noise of the milking prevented his being understood. After this, the master of the house came into the cow byre and said, "The cow shall be killed tomorrow." And Tom Thumb was so alarmed that he cried out in a clear voice, "Let me out first, for I am shut up inside her." The master heard that quite well, but did not know from whence it come. "Where art thou?" he asked. "The black one," answered Tom Thumb, but the master did not understand what that meant, and went out. The next morning the cow was killed. Happily, Tom Thumb did not meet with one blow at the cutting up and chopping. He got along the sausage meat. And when the butcher came in and began his work, he cried out with all his might, "Do not chop too deep! Do not chop too deep! I am amongst it!" No one heard this because of the noise of the chopping knife. Now poor Tom Thumb was in trouble. But trouble sharpens the wits, and he sprang out adroitly between the blows that none of them touched him, and he escaped with a whole skin. But still he could not get away. There was nothing for it but to let himself be thrust into a black pudding with the bits of bacon. His quarters there were rather confined, and beside that he was hung up in the chimney to be smoked, and there time did hang terribly heavy on his hands. At length in winter he was taken down again, as the black pudding had to be set before a guest. When the hostess was cutting it in slices, he took care not to stretch his head out too far, lest a bit of it should be cut off, and at last he saw his opportunity, cleared a passage for himself, and jumped out. The little tailor, however, would not stay longer in a house where he fared so ill, so at once he set out on his journey again. But his liberty did not last long. In open country he met with a fox, who snapped him up in a fit of absence. "Hullo, Mr. Fox," cried the little tailor. "It is I who am sticking in your throat. Set me at liberty again." "Thou art right," answered the fox. "Thou art next to nothing for me, but if thou wilt promise me the fowls in thy father's yard, I will let thee go with all my heart," replied Tom Thumb. "Thou shalt have all the cocks and the hens, and I promise thee." When the fox let him go, he himself carried him home. When the father once more saw his dear son, he willingly gave the fox all the fowls which he had. "For this I likewise bring thee a handsome bit of money," said Tom Thumb, and gave his father the kreuzer which he had earned on his travels. "Why did the fox give the poor chickens to eat?" "Oh, you goose!" Your father would surely love his child far more than the fowls in the yard.
Thank you, my friends, for joining me for our story today. Your time is very precious to me. If you enjoyed our story, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications, and share our little get-togethers with your friends. All of these things are incredibly helpful to get our stories out to more friends. I had such a wonderful time with you all today, and I hope you'll join me again tomorrow, where I will read a new tale and invite you once again to stay a while and listen.